self-doubt can be an incredible partner for you. I stay comfortable because if I go out there, what will it say about me? Will it say that I'm actually good enough? You should have self-doubt if you've never proven something.
Welcome back to another episode of the New Rules Podcast. It's your girl, Breezy, and I am here with Mr. Adrian Crawford, and his birthday is this Thursday.
Well, your birthday
You're turning, well, we're focusing on you.
Okay.
You're turning 47.
I am turning 47.
We were just talking about how 47 is the perfect age.
47 is a very interesting age. It is, because it's like you still have a lot of energy, but you're not stupid. You got some wisdom.
Yeah.
Yes. You got
You're
wisdom.
not 50 yet, but
you
are also not still in your 30s.
Yeah, so I think that part's really good. But your birthday is the day before.
Yes, we're birthday twins.
We are. So are you excited?
I am I'm excited. I wish I was turning 27. But I'm turning 26.
Yeah.
But mostly just because, I don't know, every time I have my birthday, I mean, we talk about this a lot, I don't feel like I'm 26. I feel more like I'm like 33.
It's interesting that you say that, because like you're one of the few people I've ever met, and it makes sense that like they always see themselves older. Like until about, me and my friends talk about this, until about 3, 4, 5 years ago, like I knew my age, but like internally I'm like, oh no, man, I'm still like, not like, I'm still 25 or like 27, and not from a like 27-year-old, I want to do 27-year-old things, but just feeling like I'm 27, like I'm not like an adult. I'm looking for the adult in the room, right? I'm looking for the leader in the room, and I'm like, oh crap, it's me. And that's like 3 or 4 years. I've been leading for 20-some years, and it literally about 4 years ago, and I finally hit me like, oh, I am the adult in the room, which makes no sense. But for you to think that you're like older is interesting.
Yeah,
most people think they're younger.
I feel like most people have like this little identity crisis at their birthday because they're getting older, but they feel like they're younger. I have a crisis because I'm getting older, but it still feels way too young for the age that I actually, like the pace that I actually live my life. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, guys, am I really turning just 26? I have a long life ahead of me.
It is. Old soul, Bri.
Yeah.
Old soul. Yeah. All right. So what we got today?
Today we're going to talk about the value of self-doubt.
Yeah.
So yesterday, this is kind of a topic that we talked about in Culture Creators. You haven't done Culture Creators over the past few weeks. We've done a few different things just because you've been traveling. And so one of the things that I love is whenever you've kind of had some distance away from our world, and then you come back and you bring just an incredible amount of wisdom and something really fresh and new. And so before we jump into the specifics of the topic, I would love for you to just share what made you think about the topic, and why did you think that it was an important thing for us to start talking about?
Honestly, I'd gone when I was flying back, and I realized, I'm like, oh man, I have Culture Creators tomorrow. I'd been moving my, Brooklyn.
So you came up with it in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, so I was moving. I was moving my daughter into school. And so I was flying back, and I was like, oh, I have Culture Creators. And so I was like in the car and just like thinking about like, man, what have I been like, what's been going through my brain a lot. And I was like, man, this idea of like doubt, because we live in a world where I think most people's inner dialogue is very negative. So I think what we've done to combat that in society has been, thinking positive, speaking that, which again, I think that's a really a good thing, is like, don't live from a place of doubt, believe you can do these things. And it made me start thinking about like back, it's like, but how self-doubt really helped fuel me. It helped grow me. And so I was just like, man, we're not talking about that side. Most people are just talking about here's all the positive affirmation talk, which I believe in all of it. It's funny because I'm in a season of like reminding myself consistently of who I am, but then talking about self-doubt, because I've been through that whole journey. And I think it's a very important thing, because I believe that self-doubt can be an incredible partner for you if you use it the right way.
Mm-hmm. So before we even jump into self-doubt, you just said that like positive affirmations, you said, I believe in all that.
Yeah.
Do you believe in all of that?
I believe when it's grounded in reality. And when I say positive affirmations, I more mean like a reminder of legitimately like who you actually are, not who I
So you're
spot.
not manifesting?
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not manifesting or looking at moon rocks or whatever, people do in California. But
They don't do that in Florida at all.
at all. Even though we have a big gem store right down the street.
I know. I'm like, I don't know.
I know. I'm trying to. That's one thing I'm going to do one day. Complete side note is I'm going to go into that gem store one day, and I'm like, yo, please show me your business model. This is a pretty big store, and this thing stays open. I'm like, a lot of people buying like moon rocks and gems and like crystals and all that stuff like that. So anyway, but what I would say is I just believe that it's to remind yourself, and for me, being a Jesus follower, a lot of it's rooted in my identity there, but remind myself of real skills, real ability, what I'm actually called to, who I actually am. I think that's really good because we all have inner talk that's negative, and you have to remind yourself, actually, no, this is who I am. And so I believe in it when it's grounded in reality, not aspirational, but actually, this is who I am.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit about the difference between negative self-doubt and then healthy self-doubt?
Yeah, I think, this is the two things. We'll start with negative. Negative self-doubt puts you in concrete. You don't move. It's the self-doubt to where you doubt yourself, where you never actually get into the arena. You never step in the ring. You never actually go do anything. You're just like, well, I'm just not good enough, or I don't have the resources, or man, I just, whatever the talk is, it keeps you there. Where I think positive self-doubt can be is where it allows you to go move, and it can create mastery if you do it, because you have that doubt, but you still move from there. And so, and again, it's all about perspective, because I think what happens in doubt for many people is we have to, at some point, you should have self-doubt if you've never proven something. Like it's great. We live in a world where everybody's like, well, this is what I am. Well, that's great. I'm glad you say this is who you are, but that doesn't mean anything. It's like, have you proven it? Have you put that into real tests? Have you put that to the market? That's why people, I'm an entrepreneur. Okay, well, what have you started? What have you created? What value have you brought? It's like, if you have not done that, you just have a bunch of ideas, you're not an entrepreneur. You know what I'm saying? You're just a person who fantasizes about being an entrepreneur, but you're not. Or, man, I'm going to be a great athlete, or I'm going to whatever. And it's like, you have to at some point get out there and do it. So I think negative self-doubt keeps you in concrete. I think positive self-doubt can be what can create mastery.
So if healthy self-doubt leads to mastery and destructive self-doubt leads to cemented inaction, what are the subtle signs that somebody can tell when they're leaning one way or the other? Because I think one of the things, I feel like so many people move in and out of both pretty frequently. And how do you tell when you're leaning one way?
I think, first of all, you have to know, like, self, right? Are you a person who is like fearful, right? Because a lot of times I hear people talk a lot about, like, man, I'm a risk taker, I got no fear, whatever. And then when you watch their lives, you're like, really? Like, I don't think you're that big of a risk taker, right? So I think you have to know yourself. Like, are you one person who goes to like no risk, or are you a person who takes crazy risk? You know what I'm saying? So I think it's like knowing that. No, because subtly, if you're like somebody who takes risk all the time, you're, I'm willing to go against everything. And sometimes you're like, that's just stupid. There's no point in doing that. If you're the other way, no, sometimes you may need to be nudged to go in that direction. I think the other thing is this. I think when you have those doubts, it's like evaluate the thing that you're having doubt about. Has there been any signs that's moving you in that direction? Because sometimes we have these aspirational desires to go do something. And when we have these aspirational desires to do something, sometimes we've never had any evidence. We've never had any open opportunities to go do that. But yet still, we're like, so if you have that, there's nothing, that should be a good doubt. That should be a check. Maybe that's not for me. But what if you have, but I think if you have open doors, you have seen some skills. Some people have told you, man, I think you could be good at this. Or I think, man, you would do that well. And you're like, I don't know if I should do it. That's a healthy self that you should, man, you don't know, but go in the ring and see what can happen.
So in terms of being able to see yourself rightly or reality clearly, that's so much harder than what it really sounds. And I think one of the reasons why I love this topic is because it's something that we talk about all of the time on a pretty regular basis. Like the idea of being confused sometimes, I think of what you're capable of and what you can really go after is something that you like wrestle with on a pretty regular basis. So when you're thinking about yourself though, and you are in a moment where you are really confused and unsure of what you should or shouldn't do, confused about your capacity. Can you share a little bit more about what that's actually like for you?
Yeah, because I even think recently I've been going through it with transitions and things like that. The negative side, I'll start there. I can circle and loop a lot. Like, just imagine like an airplane, just like where,
Overthinking.
yeah, overthinking an airplane, circling the runway because there's fog. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just circle and you circle, and I keep coming back to the same thing. I keep coming back to the same thing. I keep, well, is this really it? And then you feel like you have an answer, and then you come back to it again. Then you feel like I have it come back again. And I think sometimes it's because a lot of times you've never been that direction, that way before. So the doubt is like, am I heading in the right direction? Am I just missing this? Am I going to waste time if I do this? What if it doesn't? So it was interesting because the other day, what really gave me breakthrough, because I talked to you about, like, I feel like I keep looping, was that, but every day I would like still journal and write. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm feeling. Here, like those days where I feel like I should go do this, right? You feel positive, and then like 5 hours later, like, no, I should never do that again, right? So I went back, started reading a bunch of journal entries, and it was like all around the same theme. And so when I read that, I was like, oh no, but this is the thing I need to do, because it had been like for like 2 or 3 weeks. Majority of what I've been saying had been around this thing, because I think, and that's why I think it's so important that when you're going through stuff and you're trying to and you're going to walk into something and you're doing that you're constantly writing and you're doing the deep work inside, because what that does, you need to have moments that you can go back and remind yourself. And then what you can do is see patterns. I mean, I saw a pattern of honestly, of 10 journal entries, 8 of them were on, this is what this thing, you should do this, right? And so I think that's what it is. But I'll be honest, it's really difficult, because it's it is scary because you've never been in that direction before. As you get older, you're like, man, you don't want to waste time. There's also these fears I know for me, I have of am I do I think too highly of myself and my skill set and my ability, right? And especially now, because I feel like in the world I'm in, I feel like I know what I do well I would say in the pond that I'm in right now, I know what I do well. I could do that really well outside of this. And now I feel like I'm going into an ocean, and I'm like, I don't know. Can I? How good am I? And I think there's a part of me that does doubt that. There's a part of me at times where I feel like I've stayed comfortable, because if I go out there, what will it say about me? Will it say that I'm actually good enough? And I think that I've been looking back on my life, I'm like, that's always what it's been. It's always been moments where I had to go on a national stage to prove, was I this or not? And I think that over time, I always had to step out and to go into bigger ponds. And it was always scary, but there was something about it where I would respond. I think about the time, basketball being such a big part of my life. I remember when I was in Akron, and all of a sudden I was really good in Akron, but Cleveland was 30 minutes away. It's a bigger city, a lot better players. I'll never forget my first tournament. I went there, and I was there, and I was a pretty good player. But then the team I was playing against, I'll never forget this. I'm playing against this team. And we're all 7th, 8th grade. I'm super rail thin, and we're playing against this team. They got guys in literally 7th, 8th grade looked like they were in prison. You know what I'm saying? They were dudes who were 6'4", 6. We're all 13 years old and whatever. And I'll never forget being in that game. And I was freaked out. I was like, dude, I'm about to be exposed. And it's every time I went out there and I played so well. And it's every time I got into a big pond, I always responded. And I feel like now there's still nothing changing. I'm going to a bigger pond and you got to respond, but it's still super scary.
One of the things that I appreciate so much about athletics is that it does really form you and form the ability to be able to have a lack of belief or experience self-doubt, but then grow the internal operating system or mechanism in order to transfer that into action.
Yes.
If you were to describe the internal operating system that happens, your mind experiences self-doubt, and then something happens inside, and then you start moving forward anyways. You get into the arena. I think something that you said yesterday too was the idea of wanting to be somebody who swings the sword, not just grips it, which I think is really compelling.
Yep.
What is happening inside in order to transfer self-doubt into that?
Yeah, I think it's honestly becomes the next actionable step. I think what can happen is that you start thinking of the most overwhelming, okay, if I do this, you start thinking about the entire big picture versus what is the next step I can take? You think about the metaphor of being in an arena or a ring. Well, the first thing you got to do is okay, you have to go between the ropes. That's the next practical step. I gotta go through the ropes. Not thinking about, oh man, okay, I'm about to spar and fight with this person. Okay, I gotta do this and all this stuff. No, literally, you just gotta like step into the ring first. Then you get step in the ring. Okay, you check your gloves. Yeah, there's all these things you have to do before you. And I think because if you can live there, then what it does, it allows you to be present and it allows you to learn. And then you start to gain confidence as you keep taking those steps. And the more that you're present, you'll start seeing signs of like, man, am I supposed to be here? Am I not supposed to be here? And I think that's where getting in that arena, and it's like a lot of people talk about stuff. That whole idea I said about gripping, you got to swing the sword and not grip it, was really like this dream I had at one point. And it was like, when I was in my 20s, I had all these ideas, like this creative idea, but it was like all living in my head, but it wasn't actionable. And then in my dream, I literally, when my good friends was telling my dream, like, don't grip the sword swinging. It was more like, no, don't talk about how, great of an entrepreneur, these great ideas. No, go produce, go put it into the earth. And so that really challenged me to start doing that, but it was still overwhelming. So internally, I'm like, okay, what is the next step? And so that's how the internal things, how I go from that stuff to there, is literally what is the next step I have to take. And that's all I'm doing. And then I take the next step after that and the next step after that. I get overwhelmed and I get super fearful when I think about the bigger picture, because I'm like, I don't know if I have that, versus like, I know I got this, and then going from there.
So whenever you think about the analogy of getting into the ring, what brings you the most pressure? Is it like the audience, or is it the fight itself?
For me, it's security, because a lot of stuff I end up having to do, it's usually involving where I'm taking a financial risk, or I'm taking a relational risk. And those two things, at times I feel like bring me like safety and comfort. Like my relationships, my friendships matter. And financially, like being able to say, okay, like, because financially make you have this illusion of like safety and comfort or whatever. Also, that being a kind of a theme of stuff I had to deal with when I was younger. And so I think for me, what's really going on inside of me is just this overwhelming thing of like, not so much the audience and the crowd, but it's like, what would my life turn into if I fail? What will I lose if I fail? And then it goes secondary to the crowd. What will people say if I fail? And I think sometimes that's made me be slower in decisions I've made, because I'm like, man, these people think I'm a little crazy, but what if I am? And what if I fail? What are they going to say? And what I've realized is that there's been a lot of evidence in my life that I think that God's been very patient with me on, that's allowed me to walk at a certain pace, because whenever I feel I notice certain signs, I'm like, nope, this is normally the way to walk in. It's just like, nope, this is it. And it's like, I've just seen it work. You know what I'm saying? Regardless if people see it before. And that's the beauty of getting older too. You can start seeing patterns and rhythms and ways that like things start to happen in your life. So I think it's this security thing for me. And then it does become the audience.
Something that you said yesterday was that you feel like God really forces you to get into the ring, and just in having proximity to you, I feel like that's just one of the things that I've seen so evident in his life, is like you are nearly like tormented until you actually do the thing that you know what it is that you need to do. How do you become someone who is willing to get in the ring and like makes that first step without having to be forced to? You
have room. I know when we talk about, man, just jump in the ring. No, sometimes you have room. If you've never like had to take a step out there and you've never done it, I get it. That's a super scary thing to do. But I think the way it's just every single day, just making those choices to just keep going. Like, okay, nope, I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to take this next step. Think about, man, I'm just going to step into the ring. Okay, great. I'm going to take the one step toward the person the thing I'm sparring against. I'm going to take one step toward, and you just have to just every single day do that. And it becomes a discipline where you become used to actually doing that. You know what I'm saying? Like where you get used to being uncomfortable every day. I'm going to make this decision. I'm going to go do that. Because I feel like for me now it's become a thing. You're right. It's forced, because I feel like there's so many other things that are at play with it. And I think deep inside it always, for me, it's like comfort. It's weird, because I'm like, my whole thing is like write new rules, innovative reconciliation, like be a disruptor. And so and I love that stuff, but do you know what that means? That means like shit is chaotic if that's what you're doing, it's just chaotic. And but I just want it to be comfortable. And I'm like, because that's where like my parts of me that like feel like safe, but that's the broken parts of me. So that's how, I'll be honest with you, me stepping in the ring, that's actually how I heal and get better, because it's like I'm not leaning on those broken foundations of these things versus like, no, when I'm out there, I begin to heal and get better. When you step into the ring and you face your self-doubt, that's how things start to happen. That's how things get better. I think sometimes people think it's sitting there, it's like the idea of like, again, I'm using the analogy of boxing. I can watch all the videos, I can hit the punching bag, I can have a trainer doing this. But at some point in time, if you want to get good at boxing, you have to step into the ring and spar against somebody. I think so many times we stay in today's world, kind of consider like therapy or, if it's getting coaching, whatever, which are all great, we can consider that a lot of times. That's the type of stuff where like somebody's got they're hitting the boxing pad, they're out there, man, they look good on an Instagram video, you know what I'm saying? They're out there, like when my man Drake's out there hitting the punching bag, whatever, like, the punching mitts, and they're doing all that crap. It's like, cool. Well, they do all that stuff, but then it's like, but at some point, then you got to start from the ring, because there's a thing when you spar, all that stuff looks good until all of a sudden you're standing in front of somebody else who can literally knock you out. Then the real stuff comes out, and what's going to happen when you spar against stuff like that? You're going to get hit. It's part of it. So stepping out to new things, you're going to get hit. You're going to it's going to stumble. You're going to have, you're going to have setbacks. That's a part of it, but you still learn how to move and to get the skill sets you do, because I think you heal in the ring. You don't just heal just getting the coaching, you heal in the ring, just like therapy. You go there, and that's your coach. That's your, you're in there boxing, you're shadow boxing, but at some point in time, you got to go in real life. You know what I'm saying? You got to deal with those real life things.
And so the goal isn't to become like master something to the point to where you get into the ring, then the expectation is that nothing bad is going to happen.
Yeah, like think about this. Think about you. Again, when you were doing competitive stuff, right? Competitive cheerleading, whatever. Okay, it's great that like, you do it in practice, whatever. There's a whole different thing when you're now competing for a national championship and you're performing in front of people. Like all of a sudden adrenaline's high, stuff that was normal. You're like, oh my gosh, like, there's just so much that goes on. So like I think you don't master until you actually get in there and you start doing those types of things, like yesterday, you start doing coaching stuff, right? Again, you have, you've been around me, Doc, other people, and you've learned a lot. Well, one of the reasons why I wanted you to start doing that is because I think you have an incredible skill set to be an incredible coach in that. And so I'm like, oh no, you got to now go into live action now with people who you don't have really a relationship with. You're like, I'm learning, I'm getting better. And then like, okay. And then you're going to start learning the way you do it, learning the things. And I think that's okay to go through that. So you don't get mastery unless you actually have to, no athlete, no person gets better until they do like stuff that's where there's pressure that's there.
So this is good because I feel like though there's a difference. Like let's go from the coaching analogy where like I've sat in coaching calls for 4 years,
Yep.
whether it's you, Doc, whomever.
Yep.
And I've just like observed the process for a very long time.
Yep.
And so then whenever I start doing coaching, I am nervous, I'm a little bit anxious, but as it's happening, I'm like, oh, I feel very equipped. I feel like I understand the process a lot, and now it's just choosing to apply it within the moment.
Yeah.
But then there are times where I've also done stuff, and as I'm doing it, I'm so anxious because I genuinely don't know what to do. And so is it that there's like this perfect sweet spot that's like I've really practiced, I've shadow boxed enough that now whenever I'm going into the ring, I'm not as anxious because I do feel quite prepared. But then there also seems like there's a benefit though, because I also want to be the same person today if I wasn't on some of like the client calls that we have and it's only me and I'm like, I have no idea what to tell you right now. And I'm just praying to God that something comes out that's remotely good and a strong reflection of who we are.
Yep.
And I feel like both have formed us, but it's really easy to look at it and be like, well, this experience was the good one, and this one meant that I wasn't ready.
Yeah. No, I think there needs to be, in healthy development, there needs to be training, and there also needs to be parts of the sink or swim where you just get thrown in the pool. That's actually, good development, because sometimes you may be like, so for example, there are certain things that we were learning and building together, to where like I was learning just like you were learning. So I'm like, all right, Chief, like, yeah, we got to figure this out together. So I'm like, all right, you go, like you jump in the water, you got to go.
Like EBITDA, we're like, yeah.
EBITDA. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
I'm like, dude, I'm like, God, you got to keep reminding me, what's EBITDA, Bri? Like, you already actually
You're like,
50 times. What's EBITDA again? Right? And so like, but it's like, but you had to go and you learned and you had to prepare yourself, and yeah, you were thrown into the deep end and whatever. But then on this other side of it, on certain things, man, you got to learn. So now it's, and you will be able to sit in certain calls that were like way more difficult than the ones that you're in. And so you're like, oh yeah, I've seen this. You know what I'm saying? Then every now and then I was like, hey, what do you think? And then you're like, it's kind of like I'll throw you in there like for like 30 seconds, a minute, whatever, you kind of boom, 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 box a little bit, you know what I'm saying? Then you step out, and then it's boom, like boom, 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 box a little bit, then you step out, right? But it's like now, oh no, you need to stand there on your own. And what you'll learn is, I tell people, it's okay early on, and this is kind of dovetailing, to like copy people who you are like, who you think you do a really good job, because you start to learn your style versus like, I gotta create my own style, I gotta do this. No, I tell people, when I first started communicating, dude, I would find who's my favorite communicator. So I'm like, who's the best? I'm just gonna copy what they do. Why? Because like I didn't know what my style was yet. I am now 20 plus years into communicating, that about a year or two ago, I've really found like how I communicate. Like this is completely my style. It's not a hybrid of somebody else. This is just me. Well, that took time, right? That took over 10,000 hours of figuring that out. So I do think, so anyway, I just answer your question. I mean, or kind of sum it up, I think it's both. I think it's the reality. You need to be able to have sink or swim, but also you need to be prepared. A lot of my friends, when we came up, we were just sink or swim. They just threw us in the deep end. Mm-hmm. I was on a board call last night, and one of my friends, I'm on his board, he literally was like, he had 2 or 3 new people sitting in the meeting. I'm like, I didn't know who they were. And here's what he said. He was like, and this is a church context. He was like, yeah, I got these 2 guys here because eventually they want to go and eventually have their own church and do things like that. He's like, and I don't want the first time for them to be in a board meeting is when they're running it. And that's how it was for all of us. We had no idea, like, what was it like, set a budget, do any of that crap. We were like,
minutes,
like nothing. And then like now we're like, oh, that's good. You know what I mean? Like when we're developing communicators here, we grew up, we figured out on our own. With people here, no, I want them to be better prepared and equipped. But it doesn't stop that. They still got to get on stage and they still got to deliver in front of people. Mm-hmm. And so I think you need to have both those worlds.
Do you ever get caught in trying to change somebody else's self-doubt?
Absolutely. Especially for me, for sure, because like, in Strength Finders, my number one gift in Strength Finders is restorative. So what that means is like, I see things that are broken to what they should be. So when I, a lot of times, see what someone can be, and I literally like try to will them to a place to get there, because I'm like, no, I see it. I see very clearly, but they can't. And sometimes what I realize, sometimes it's good. It can inspire, but for the most part, people are ready when they're ready. And so you can speak life over, but you can't force them. So a lot of times I'll just be, what I've learned over the years, before I used to be like, it keep me up at night. I'm over there just constantly bringing it up to them, all that stuff over and over. Now it's kind of like, I'll say it, communicate it. I'm like, no, like, you'll be here, but I'm more confident now saying if you want to make this impact, this is stuff you're going to have to do. So it's up to you. However quick you want to do it, however long you want to take, this is going to be the process.
Yeah. So going back to the idea of the audience, whenever I was reflecting after you were talking yesterday, I was thinking about, okay, what are the things that keep me from going into the ring? And for me, it is the audience. Like in my mind, genuinely, if nobody was ever watching, the things that I would just do, the wildest things, I would take the craziest risk. And I think that I do more than the average person, but definitely not at the capacity that I have. And it's largely because I feel so like tied to I don't mind if people disagree with me if it's something that I truly believe in, but the idea of being like misconstrued or misinterpreted is just so painful for me that's the thing that will keep me from going into the ring. I think that it's because, I don't know if this is the deepest why, but I think there is a part of it, like whenever you reference cheerleading, for example, that's not the only arena within my life where it shows up. The access and like availability that I had to elevate was purely determined based off of how this audience perceives me. Because I didn't grow up with a lot of access or a lot of resources. And so it's like, I have to be like the absolute best, how I would define best might be different from how you define best.
Yep.
But I think over time I could kind of subconsciously learned, how do I need to show up in order for whomever XYZ to like help me kind of get to the next level.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm always thinking about that in terms of I think just how I show up.
Yeah. No, and that makes sense, because I think that was a learned behavior that you had to do in order to get access, like you perform, you get access, which that's where a lot of people are. And I think that the way that, in my opinion, I think the way that you start to rewire that is sometimes some of that's true. You have to admit, like, to get access to places, you have to be good at something and you have to respond. So I think sometimes when you just like, some people try to go the other way. No, it's not at all. I'm like, no, dude, you still got to perform sometime to get to those places. It's just the fact that, but sometimes I think we still perform in places where we're like, oh no, I've already proven this. You know what I mean? Like, who cares what they think? I'm actually good at this. And that's hard, But I also think, again, that's another part of the wrestling and doubt that shows up when you're at where you're at in life. You're just starting off. You're getting going. So like, you don't know, like, I think I'm good at this, or I think this may be right. You know what's going to happen, Bri? 5 years from now, you have a very strong opinion about certain things. 5 years from now, you're like, oh, you're going to live life like, you know what? Nope, I don't believe that. And that's okay. Like, I really genuinely believe, like, for people, like, that's a part of the evolution of a human, that your beliefs grow because, like, you have a strong opinion, but then, like, that bumps against life. That's how we figure out what our worldviews are, what we care about. And I think it's okay to change your mind. You know what I'm saying? I think the difference is, like, a lot of times when people communicate, especially when you're younger, I used to always do this, you communicate with such this conviction, like it's the only right way. I think you can have a very strong stance, but you can just do it from a place of like, no, this is what I believe. And not be like, nope, and making people, if you don't believe this, you're an idiot. Or if you don't believe this, like, you're complete. No, like, this is what I believe. And then, like, because I think that's what makes everybody then, like, why they then don't want to change their mind is because they made such this big stance and they cause all these fights and enemies with people because of the way they did it. Versus, like, no, you have the ability to change your mind. There's things I believed in my 20s where I'm like, no, I don't believe those anymore. But when I was in my 20s, 100% I believe those, because that's what I knew. And I think that's just a part of the evolution and growth. So my encouragement to you is like, like, you believe this, step out and do it. And you know what? There are going to be things you're going to look back like, oh, and it's going to be a great thing. And all this stuff's recorded. So what? You know what I'm saying? Like, I was recorded. Yeah, I changed my mind. Why'd you change your mind? Oh, I got more information. I live a little bit more life. And if people can't have grace and compassion on that, which some people will, some people won't, those are the people you want to rock with anyway. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, and I guess so where I was going to take that was, or to start off, if I'm in the ring and I fail the fight or I change my mind, to myself, if it's like just me, I genuinely don't think of myself any differently. I think it's whenever I start to hear chatter where it's like, oh, well, if you thought that once, you must have been dumb. Or like just little things like that then I start to get, I'm like, well, was I? Like, that wasn't my starting point. But then I start to hear it and now I'm confused. I'm like, wait, but was I dumb? If I was dumb, like, am I still dumb? Like, what am I thinking? Like, all the thoughts start to go through my mind. But because of that, what I will do, because I feel like you're similar, like, I have such a very vivid internal world. I have such a vivid imagination. And so shadow boxing to me isn't like just shadow boxing. It's like this intense, emotional, experiential simulation that it's like the closest you can make shadow boxing to a fight. Like, I have the ability to do that within my internal world where it's like, the imagination is just so vivid and it feels so real that I can almost start to convince myself that I had the fight whenever I just spent so much time inside of my internal world thinking about it. And so I heard I believe it was Hermosi who talked about this, but it was really compelling. It's kind of an explicit statement, but the phrase is mental masturbation, and so it's over-analysis, and the definition is intellectual indulgence that gives a rush of insight without the cost of risk or execution. This is your brain's way of giving you the satisfaction of doing something while you remain in the safety of your own head. And it's like, I will live within the walls of my mind, and I will like create these such vivid emotional experiential worlds, and they're not easy. They're not like the fantasy worlds. They're like really hard, like warrior, like noble things. that emotionally I feel like I've experienced the pressure, and to a level I think that's helpful and it's useful to get that information, because I do feel more prepared whenever I go into it, but I can build the habit of thinking that I've been in the ring for a fight when the whole time I've just had the opportunity to have access to really, really good shadow boxing.
Yeah. Well, I was watching the documentary, The Hunt for Osama bin Laden, right? It's on Netflix. And in the third episode of it, the last one, they talk about when they got the call, when I think it was SEAL Team 6 got the call that they were going to go get bin Laden. And what they talked about is how they went through like the potential scenarios. And what was really interesting is they built this simulation of what the compound looked like, and they did it over and over. I mean, every day there were so many reps they did. This happened. Well, the story goes to where they fly the helicopters in, and because of this like wind gust, whatever it was, one of the helicopters crashes. So they couldn't land where they were supposed to, because one, I think, was supposed to be like up on the roofs. They had the whole plan. So that happened. So now what do they do next? And the guys talked about like, all right, they started doing this, but because they had practiced all these scenarios, I mean, intense for like 2 or 3 weeks, however long it was, they were able to find oh no, this guy's we're about to blow the door. He's like, no, don't blow the door. I'm right here. And they open the door, because those guys who didn't go there, they still knew we're still trying to get here. And so the point, I think, in what you're saying, having those things were in your mind where you're like, okay, here's these scenarios, here's something. It's really good, because when you do get in those situations, you can respond and react, because things are going to be different. I think and I think if you don't ever learn how to do those things, you can't react in real time. But you're absolutely right. Sometimes we can live in our minds in these things and create so much emotional whatever that it just really does feel like you're like, you emotionally feel beat up, because you've been fighting, because like you said, I'm like you, when I'm having these scenarios, I'm not dreaming of this like this fantasy where I'm literally
we're like talking to ourselves.
I'm like, oh, this is what's gonna happen. I mean, I may go broke here. I'm like literally I may go broke. Okay, what if I had to go? I'm gonna go borrow this, and then what if I got to go talk to this person about this, and then I play that scenario out, and I don't want to talk to them, and then they're gonna think this about.
These are the 5 things that they may say, and if they say any of these, then I'm going to say this.
All that's going on in your head, and you're like, you do that for about 30 minutes. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh man, that was a great conversation. And I didn't even talk to anybody. It was just there. But here's what it does. But I think that when you're constantly thinking at that level, it does help you, but you do have to put it in action. I think a lot of people, where they go, they live in this world of, I think a lot of people live in a world of what they think they are, and they can live in the fantasy world of, man, if I had my opportunity, right? It's the whole thing I say this story about Jimbo Fisher, who was a Florida State's head coach of football, but when he was a quarterback's coach, talking to a player. And the player was, so talented. I mean, like, he was the prototypical, if you want to pick a quarterback, he was the guy from a skills ability, physical ability, all that. And the guy, he just literally looked at him one day, and he's like, that's the problem. He's like, you want to be the guy who should be the guy, but will never be the guy. That's where I think a lot of people live. They love they love the idea of, if I had my chance, and they live there because you know what? It's all ideals. It's all potential. It's not real life. And then people want to step into that arena, because now it's going to expose, are you really that or not? And so I think that's where, for you and I, we go deeper ways. I think some people, they don't even think like that. It's all positive. Oh yeah, if I did this, I do this. People who are at work, oh man, if I was the boss, I'd do this, this, and this. And man, if I was in that chair, I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't do this. Oh man, our employees would get this. Until you sit in that chair and you're like, oh yeah, but what about this thing? What about this thing? What about this thing? You'll be, And so I think those are just the idea that you have to make tough calls and decisions. And I think you have to get in that arena.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think something that I was thinking about when you were talking to you is, like, sometimes the intense shadow boxing is really good when you're nervous about getting in the ring, but it's not time to get into the ring yet.
Yeah.
And so it does give you something to kind of get the energy circulating.
Yes.
But then the challenge is that it also creates this mindset that can be so, like, obsessive and controlling and ultimately prideful. It's like you start to believe that you're owed a certain outcome.
Yep.
And then if that outcome doesn't happen, then the circle back is that my simulation wasn't good enough. My prediction wasn't good enough. And so I just need to become an even better master at learning how to predict and control everything.
That's it.
And then we call ourselves risk takers. It's like, no, we're not risk takers. We're not willing to do it without coming up with the perfect plan, the perfect scenario with having all of the information. Even if people looked at the external reality of our lives, like we do a lot of risk-taking things, but definitely not at the capacity with the intensity and the quickness that we probably really should.
Yeah. And I fully agree, because you can just live in your mind as a risk taker. But I always tell people, you're a risk taker, look at the evidence. And again, being a risk taker, we're not just talking about you just blindly like doing like stuff. Even like people who, I follow this one account, and it's a guy, he like makes jokes about like, he's like, he calls them random white acts of danger, right? And he's just like, and it's really about like just white people doing crazy things, like jumping off. The other day, it was a dude literally, it like a lad. My man was he was parachuting off a thing, but he had like a freaking like, it was like literally like a carpet, and he like jumped off a thing, and he's like, and we're like, but here's what happens with people like that. They aren't just randomly going up there and just being like, you know what? I am not prepared. I've done nothing. Let me just jump off this cliff. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, they took a risk. Yeah, you could die doing it, but they've prepared for that. They've had a certain amount of jumps. They've looked at, okay, what's the wind like today? They're not just randomly like, I'm just going to walk up here and jump off a cliff today. I think so many times we think risk taking is like the absence of like critical thinking. No, really good risk takers they take the right risk. They calculate, they look at it. Do I got the skill set, ability, whatever? But it's also still a risk. It's like, nope, but I'm going to have to leverage this, and it may work, it may not work. But I think that's the thing. When we think about risk taking on here and jumping in the arena, that is not like just doing it with the absence of like not being able to critically think and have the right information. So
when you were talking about when you were first preaching or communicating, whatever, so you would listen to your favorite communicator and try to emulate them. I think that's a great thing to do, and I do that also in like art, video, whatever. And the problem that I then find myself facing pretty consistently is that I can't do it as well as them for obvious reasons. It's not exactly my style, or they've been professionals for 20 years.
Yeah.
I'm not, and that is so discouraging to me when I can't. I guess instead of emulating, I'm trying to replicate, and I can't replicate it, and so then I'm like, I'm terrible.
Yeah.
So in your experience, did you also have that experience? And either way, like, how would you kind of mentally work it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked that for clarity. So one of my favorite communicators is a guy by the name of Andy Stanley. And so like when you listen to him communicate, to me, it was like watching Tiger Woods play golf, because he would take one point and he would thread that one point the entire time. I mean, like you walk away, like he's one of the few people I ever listened to him like communicate. I can remember almost 70, 80% of what he said, like after the first listen, because it is just so like, you're just following a pathway. I'm like, oh, his ability to thread that is unbelievable. Now what I did is I learned what was his formula to what he did. So he used to have this formula, me, we, God, you, we, right? That was kind of his formula, and you would fill it in. I took the formula, but I put me in the formula. And I wasn't trying to I couldn't do that one line like him, because he was just, but I was a really good storyteller on the front end, whatever. But I took his formula and I put me within the formula. I think what has to happen if you see someone like is finding out, okay, trying to find out what do they do when they're creating these videos. What are they looking for? Oh, here's my framework. Then putting you in those frameworks versus like, okay, they use this color grading, I'm using exactly that color grading with this thing, whatever, and I can't get it. No, it's just saying what makes their videos great. It's the color grading or the way they cut these clips, whatever, that's fine, but there's a framework of how they do that. So I would try to dive deeper, find what's their framework, and then fill in you into those things. And that's how it's that safety where you get your own style a little bit, but you're within a system versus trying to create your own system. That's where most people get messed up. They go out there, I'm just going to be unique, create your own system. I'm like, dude, that's like rare to be able to like come out there and to do that. Versus like somebody's got a good system, man. let me learn how to paint in the box, and then here's what you'll learn. Then you'll learn your own, because you'll start realizing, yeah, this is good, but that still hinders me here. All right, so now I have my own version of me, we, God, you, we, but it's completely me now. And it's around storytelling. It's around let me pull the problem. It's around, I'm way more challenging than Andy is. Like, I'm very direct on certain things. So I can do it that way. And so I've learned to communicate that, but it's taken me time. I've taken things from him. I've taken things from other communicators that actually have helped me. So that's what I would say. That's how you get out of it. Because if you're right, if you're just only trying to like do exactly what they do, you're just not going to be able to do it because you're not that person. But their frameworks can be super, super helpful to you find your own. Well, hey guys, I hope today was actually helpful for you. Here's the deal. All of us deal with self-doubt, and it's very hard sometimes to move forward. But self-doubt is actually a good thing, because what self-doubt can do, it can begin to move you forward and to really show if you have it or not. Let me tell you this, one of the worst things you can do in your life is to just live in your head of thinking you are something that you're not, or never trying something because you're afraid of what may happen. Let me tell you, at some point in time, you got to get in the ring. You got to let self-doubt be a sparring partner with you, because whatever the information it gives you, it's good information. Either, man, it can confirm this, or it can say, no, this is not you. You know what it allows you to do? To get into another ring and try something different. And so I want to encourage you this week, take just a next step. Hey, I got self-doubt towards something. I don't know if I should do it. Take a step in that direction. What's the next practical step you can do in that direction? And listen, if you do that, I'm telling you, this will be the thing that starts to move you forward and changing your life. And keep writing new rules.